Welcome to version 4.2 of the Stream Deck Midi plugin. This is a big update and most of the changes are for plugin scripting. But let's start with a list of the most important bug fixes and some things not related to scripting. I will not go into details for this list, so please pause the video or visit the website if you need time to read this list. For the generic MIDI button, there is now an option to reset the active button by long pressing it. If you, for example, control articulations, you can turn off the active articulation without needing to activate another one. In the editor, the UI has been made slightly crisper. There isn't a big difference, but the labels are slightly brighter and the fields are more clearly defined and aligned. There is also a performance boost when updating images on buttons. Older versions of the Stream Deck software couldn't handle a high frequency of image updates, so the plugin had restrictions for the image update frequency. Newer versions of the Stream Deck software don't seem to have this problem, so image updates are now at full speed. Now over to scripting changes, and the rest of this video will be about scripting. So let's take a look at the global settings. The first thing is for background scripts, where you now have 8 scripts available instead of 4. The next thing is for state restore. Previously, the MIDI state was restored in parallel with everything else, meaning that if you had scripts with init plus commands that referenced MIDI state, it was a timing issue whether they referenced the restored MIDI state or not. Now the plugin ensures that the MIDI state is restored before any scripts are initialized, so you know that you are working with the restored state. The final thing is for script variables. In previous versions, a variable could hold either a string or an integer. Now there is an extended mode where a variable can also store a floating point value. This can be a breaking change, so you need to enable extended mode yourself if you need variables to hold floating point values. If you don't need that, you can safely stay with the classic mode. In the script variables window, there are some changes. First, there is a new column for variable type. The first letter is L or G for local and global, and the second letter is I, S or F for integer, string and floating point. There are also several new options for how the information is sorted and displayed. And you can select to use global settings or unique settings. If you select global settings, any change you make to the display options will affect all buttons and dials using global settings. And if you select unique settings, any change you make to the options will only affect the button or dial you used to open this window. There are several new features for events. And the first one is something many of you have been asking for, and that is the ability to reference variables in events. So you can have an event like this, meaning that whenever a control change command is received, the plugin will check the received value against the content of the variable. There are 2 things to note here. One thing is that you cannot have math expressions or things in hash characters like for actions. You can only have a simple variable reference. And the second thing is that the only thing that will trigger this event is that the plugin receives a control change command. If you change the content of the variable, it will not trigger the event, but the new value will be used the next time the plugin receives a control change command. The next new feature is wildcards, where you can use question mark and asterisk as replacements for single and multiple characters. Next new feature is for advanced users, where you can define a regex expression to be matched against the received value. And finally, you can use exclamation mark to negate the outcome of the test. So in this example, the event will trigger for all values except the value 10. The exclamation mark can be combined with any other option available for properties. So you can, for instance, negate the outcome of a variable test by prefixing the variable name with an exclamation mark. There are now many ways to define event properties, and to improve the clarity of the documentation, I have added checkbox lists like this for each property, showing the available options for that specific property. I have also changed the documentation a bit, so the event reference variables are now documented together with each event instead of being documented on a separate page. The final change for events is for list selection. Previously, you had to use useText or useIndex to tell the plugin how you reference list items. Now there is a third option called useAuto, which is the default option, and with that selected, the plugin tries to find out itself what kind of reference it is. So if an item reference can be seen as a single integer or an interval, the plugin will assume it is an index reference, and if it cannot, it assumes it is a text reference. So you can have text references and index references in the same script without having to change the list options. If we move to actions, there is a small change in the image action, where you can send an SVG string to the action. This is not a path to an SVG image, you could do that before, but this is the actual SVG string. So you can create and modify an SVG string in the script in variables and then send this string to the image action. For this to work, you must prefix the string in a certain way, so the Stream Deck software understands what we are sending to it. So please check the webpage for details. In this version, I have renamed the math menu item to functions library, because what initially was a library for math functions now include many other kinds of functions, so I call it a functions library. I will not go into detail for all the new functions in this version, so please check this webpage and scan for items that are marked with 4.2 or later. The big changes are that there is now a function to load data from a file, so you can load something from a file and store in a variable, for instance. There are a number of new functions which enables you to use a comma-separated list as a kind of indexed variable. There is a function to get date and time in various formats, and there are some new functions that simplifies single bit manipulation. But check the website for more details about these functions.